I wish that had been on the recording too.
It might bear repeating.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, what I said just before I turned this recording on was that I feel sad and I feel angry because there were at least 5 women who are mothers who wanted to be here tonight for this and who have let me know that for one reason or another, mostly to do with husbands and children and tiredness, they're choosing not to come. And and so I am recording so as to be able to share this with other mothers. And I want to especially welcome Zoe. You are a mother and a very busy mother and partner, and you made it. So yay for making it to a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you,
Yeah.
Brianne and Naomi, for also being here. And here is Shannon also, who has been playing a role in regard to supporting the process. And there are many other European based women and men who have been significant parts of my mother graduation initiation process that officially started in about July and unofficially started about this time last year, and will continue. The process will continue on at least until the middle of 2026, I think I calculated.
Yes.
When my youngest daughter, Karis, comes of age. And I feel glad about having this 5-year stretch ahead of me to really deepen into this work, because I've been a mother for over 30 years now. And during that time, everything that possibility managers before me have created in order to honor the graduation from motherhood of other next culture edge workers has given me so much to work with. And I feel so glad about that. But before I get into it, I'm going to set some context about this space. And this space is a little bit of a mystery to me, what it wants to be. I created it because I felt the necessity in me as a mother going through this graduation initiation to share as I went, because it just seemed really like out of order to wait to share later. And I also, as I've been doing this work and feeling like having the experience of being alone in it, even with incredible support from space holders and my village, that there was still this flavor of motherhood as this very lonely, very rich, very, like there could be so much more happening sense of necessity that especially as a mother who no longer has day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour mothering duties, that I really want the treasure of the work I'm doing to be to be available to mothers who are still in it, especially because I have this wealth of experience alongside these this capacity, and now greater and greater ability as I proceed along the trainer path in possibility management, to hold space for initiation to happen. And I don't mean the kind of initiation where you set a date and you have a big ceremony and lots of people come and there's this ritual. And I mean the kinds of initiations that really, in the context of modern culture, we're catching up on, initiations that didn't happen years and years and years ago. Even when, I mean, we're catching up on initiations that didn't happen amongst our ancestors. And that's a lot of initiations to be catching up on.
Mm.
And as I start to notice and enjoy the new results that I'm getting in my life from having gone through authentic adult healing and initiation processes, it's as if, it's not as if, it is what my experience is that my archetypal anger and sadness and fear about how many humans on this earth who are stewards of work and children and families and each other are doing all of this without having been initiated, without having cleared these emotional loads out of our emotional bodies, without having come down to these old decisions that we made out of necessity to survive, and new decisions, conscious decisions, aren't getting a chance to be made, so that we can be living in these more awake, aware, consciously choosing, radically responsibly choosing ways. And until those unconscious choices are made conscious, they run our lives. My life as a mother, my stories of agony as a mother, all come back to these unconscious old survival decisions and mechanisms and strategies that have been running my life.
Mm.
The number of things, the number of times I did something that I didn't want to be doing as a mother because I wasn't initiated. That I've, the ways that my children have been conditioned themselves now in ways that I never wanted for them.
Mm.
This work is extensive and expansive, and I don't think there's a single human it doesn't touch, because we each have a mother, and because how each of us relate to our mother and to other mothers is intrinsically connected and bound by how we relate to women in general who aren't mothers, to and to Gaia, the earth. So my main request of you here today is to is to witness what I have to say at this point as a kind of practice that I'm experimenting with, a type of speaking that in possibility management we call dragon speaking. And it's about using anger consciously to speak about things that we care about, and often doing that without knowing even what we're going to say. I don't know how this is going to go. There may come times where my sense is that what comes next is not for me to say something. And so when that happens, I suspect that I might ask to hear what others have to say. And I also don't want to wait necessarily for, if there's something that really is like coming up so strongly in one of you, I would want you to interrupt me even. So I give you I request that you interrupt me if there's something you have to say that's just bursting, that you have this like rich, precious impulse about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Zoe, I'd love for you to say out loud what you just wrote, because it's so valuable for me. It's to me.
Yes.
Yeah, I really resonate with you. Thank you for sharing, Nicole. I feel so glad to be here to witness whatever it is that is being birthed out of you at this time and created through you and from you. And also just want to speak to the fact that it's not only the initiation, but it's also that true village parenting doesn't exist because our culture has lost community or has lost touch. And that's not the case for everybody, but certainly I feel the generalization is really valid, that we've lost community, or people don't know how to show up for community, and therefore village parenting ceases to exist. And I have said in community that the fastest way to lose community is to become a parent.
Oof.
Thank you, Zoe. I've been feeling really scared about tonight because of how much I'm discovering, how much even as a mother who I knew the whole time I was a mother, I knew that I wasn't doing it the mainstream, regular society, modern culture way. I was already on the edges of that culture. And I already saw so much about how being a mother in modern culture was a setup. This became so obvious to me as I prepared to give birth to my eldest son, whose name is Sagan. I had the great fortune and the very tricky fortune of being introduced to the possibility of giving birth at home with midwives instead of going into hospital. And when this possibility was first presented to me, I thought the person was crazy, because all I knew was that babies were born in hospitals. This person persisted and told me that what they saw about me was that I was a person who was very much aware of how nature had wisdom and intelligence in it, and that humans, the way humans are living, couldn't match or couldn't meet that wisdom. except by going back to natural ways, and that giving birth was a main example that he had about that. And he opened up just enough space for me to take a closer look. And the more I learned about home birthing, even birthing outside of the medical system, outside of medical spaces, the more I learned about it, the more I realized that I was afraid to go into a medical space to give birth. And I liken it to, and this is going to sound crude perhaps, but giving birth to a child is a lot like going poo, where your body has to open and be very vulnerable for the time that this is happening. And of course, it lasts much longer. And what you birth is something precious rather than something that you want to cover up with dirt and walk away from and have nobody ever see. But doing even that bathroom version of this short, quick birth of something that is a deposit and leave item is not something that very many people want to do with strangers watching them. And it occurred to me that going into a hospital surrounded by strangers who I gave authority to as a member of modern culture, I gave authority to doctors and nurses who knew things that I didn't. I put my life in their hands in ways just by being part of modern culture. I didn't think that I wanted to do something as vulnerable as opening my body and pushing out a child out of my most private part of my body with people that I didn't know and who I felt small around, or who I thought I needed to make myself small around. And my story about it now is that whoever works in the Earth's Coincidence Control Office noticed me and set up some incredible coincidences that made it possible for me to give birth for the first time in a cabin beside the sea, attended by pirate midwives who were working against the law to attend a woman in birth, risking their freedom, risking their lives and their families to do something that they were believed in and cared about so much, because they had their own experiences with their own children and had chosen to devote their lives to learning to attend women and to do this safely, and not just safely, but to do this in a way that honored the very precious and delicate beginning of human life. So I knew from the start that the way that I was committed to being a mother was not the way that most mothers were doing it. And I encountered great resistance in the form of other people's unconscious fears and beliefs about how it should go. And these were at times vicious. I was told that I was irresponsible and selfish by people who believed that giving birth in a hospital was the only safe way to birth a child. Somehow it had escaped their notice that up until very recently in human history, which is hundreds of thousands of years, that women did not have hospitals to give birth in. They were also people who had not found out that there has been a period in human medical history where babies died and women died far more often than ever before, because the men who were taking over as authorities about birth as a medical experience rather than as a natural human experience were causing death because
Yes.
they didn't have the wisdom, the traditional, perhaps unconscious wisdom of midwives passed down through generations and generations and generations, way back to when we lived without anything between us and the earth. And I know that going into this mother graduation is another example that could provoke viciousness in people. I have already heard friends of mine tell me that there's something wrong with me about doing a mother graduation. They didn't even pause to ask me what it was. They went right into telling me that I will never graduate from motherhood. Motherhood is a lifelong job. And that if I graduated from it, then I was abandoning my children and not a good mother. And I have been scared of people assuming that they know what mother graduation is and forgetting to check their assumption with me and spreading gossip, really, gremlin food about this crazy woman who thinks that it's okay to abandon her children and have a life of her own. And I've been encouraged and glad to hear from a lot of grown humans who aren't themselves mothers or fathers yet, but who have said that they wish their mother would do a mother graduation. And I have 4
To me,
children.
this shows connection went down. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And now.
Yeah. To me, this shows just how disconnected we are from ourselves and nature and each other, that people can make such crude comments about something as sacred as motherhood. Like, I'd expect for us to slow down about it and really feel into it and really communicate about it and find a way together as a village that we do things. And it sounds like such a defensive conversation happening at times. And I want to say that I know a lot of vicious midwives, in the sense of vicious is not the right word, but archetypally angry midwives that accompany people. I know one in Mexico, they accompany women in the last whole month. They stay with them for a whole month in a woman's house. And just the anger of things that are happening in hospitals right now, where the cesarean is being prioritized as if it was a safer option, and all the things that are behind that. And I'm also so surprised to hear these stories about childbirth in hospitals being like it being not in a hospital, it's being so alien, because I'm partially from Holland and it's pretty normal to do childbirth at home there. And I feel sad that it's not as common in the world as it is there.
Thank you. Me too. Most of the research that I was able to do 30 years ago as a mother orienting toward home birth came out of Holland. And I'm aware that there have been what people call strides made in midwifery in Canada. For example, now in Canada, there's no such thing there is still such thing as illegal midwifery, but has been legalized. And I feel so sad to tell you that the midwife who was the shining, warm, intuitive lighthouse person for me, her name is Wendy Clemens. She was one of the first midwives who was allowed to join the College of Midwifery when it was first formed in BC. Because of her vast experience, she had caught so many babies. Shortly after the college was set out, she left it and partly was kicked out of it because it was so limiting and distrustful. And I have heard stories of other midwives, other women who have given birth with midwives who did not have great experiences. And I even have stories myself about ways that more modern midwives did things that I believe came from their not having been initiated as authentic adult humans, and therefore they carried this unconscious fear and this kind of these reactive patterns when it came to covering their butts. And I'm not, even though I feel anger about this, I am not blaming them. Because I know that, like I was saying about motherhood being a setup, it's also a setup to be a midwife. It's a setup to be a childcare worker. It's even a setup, I would say, and Zoe, I'm curious to hear what you might have to say about this. It's a setup even to be a dance teacher like you are. It's a setup to be a teacher in a school. And this is where my anger and sadness just, I can start to feel them, the force of them behind me, this archetypal anger and sadness about how we pay lip service in modern culture to how important mothers are and how important children are. And yet, it's like the secret is that we're really in service to profit, and that mothers are a burden unless they are earning money and enslaving themselves somehow in the system, and that families are a nuisance because they get in the way of men working and being better slaves in patriarchy,
Mm-hmm.
and that children are a nuisance. And there is there are also all kinds of other mimetic thoughtware in modern culture that I really heard spoken about for the first time in possibility management spaces. And when I witnessed this, I there was such an extraordinary quality to the space where such things are spoken of, while also there was this incredible hazard that I was going to feel things that were incredibly difficult to feel. And this has been my fear about taking a stand for mothers and children and men and the earth as I move through mother graduation. Because the emotions there are to feel are intense, and my sense is that people in general are doing their utmost to avoid feeling these big,
Yes.
scary feelings. And I believe that this is where the arguing comes from, the shutting down, the vicious attack on me, turning me into some kind of perpetrator for talking about things rawly and openly. And this unconscious impulse that so many people have to stop the pain, even though stopping it perpetuates it even more.
Nicole, may I speak to as you talk, I just have all of these visions inside of me, like, this is the witch hunt, this is it. Even saying things like, patriarchy, men, women, these are all very dangerous things in our culture today. This identifying as a woman, giving birth as a woman, identifying with Mama Gaia, this is dangerous now. And I just want to speak to that. I just want that to ripple into the ethers, that why should my experience be dangerous? Why, if I identify as a woman and have felt perpetrated by men or patriarchy, or even the separation of the two, men not being patriarchal, the two being separate and distinct, not attacking men, because I believe in the divine man and I believe in the divine woman and I believe in the union of the two. But I just want to speak to the fact that this is scary and this is dangerous, and I'm here for it.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. This visceral fear of the witch hunt has been a very common thread through my whole life. And there have been periods in human history where it was a matter of survival to not whisper in case a neighbor might hear that you had any kinds of behaviors or beliefs that went against the prevalent authority of the local patriarchs, who, from what I've read, had very thorough strategies for eradicating people who were connected to Gaia, who were empowered and empowering each other to not give their authority away to the local patriarchs. And I feel so glad, Zoe, that you also brought up this distinction between man and men and patriarchy. And for a long time, I grappled with this because I had in me both a deep love and respect and affinity for men, having had such a close connection with my father, who died when I was 23. And also, I had this almost secret to me, out of loyalty to my father, this secret anger about this kind of anonymous white man who decided all kinds of things for me and my life and for my mother and my father and my brothers, and imposed their authority and their ways upon us, such that the delicacy of our connection was turned into sometimes something that it wasn't, and thwarted. And my experience was that there was this something in the air in modern culture that made the magic of human to human connection wrong and bad. And I encountered that as I nursed my children. And there was this mimetic intrusion that said, "You're spoiling them." I encountered it as I considered not sending my children to school, that would be so disempowering for them, as if children aren't built to learn. My children did go to school because not only did we lack village in a general sense, not only did we lack a woman's culture in a general sense, there was also no children's culture. And the only place that children's culture was available to my children was in the local school, because that's where all the children were, except for a few local homeschooling families who were isolated because the children around them were in school, and who were also often families wherein it was their socioeconomic status that made it possible for them to keep their children home and have one or both, say, part-time parents being there with the children, rather than having both or one parent only being the available breadwinner. And how capitalism comes into it too has fascinated me and angered me.
I want to say something about, as a young woman, how devastating it was when I realized that I could never be a stay-at-home mom, that this was not an option for me. Like, in this culture, this modern culture, for young women entering adulthood, it is completely out of the question to choose to be a stay-at-home mother, and to not go into the workplace and make myself a slave of some kind of corporate system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brianne.
That brings me to another way in which I was, partly by necessity and partly by choice, a mother on the edge of modern culture. 30 years ago, when I became a mother, I was barely 21, and I had not had the chance to get an education or establish a career. And I wanted to be a stay-at-home mother. The fathers of my children have all struggled with being earning the breadwinner, the financial slave, I'll even dare to say, of the family, in partnership with a woman who was so determined to be at home with her children. And this was another way that I faced judgment and scrutiny and disapproval. As a young woman, I had done very well in school, and great things were expected of me. And for me to have, partly by choice, partly by, again, the kind of coincidence of not really having a viable option in the form of a career possibility that would pay me enough to make it worth not being with my children. It would have had to have been a very high-paying job. And I chose more than once in my life to allow myself to swallow my pride and collect social assistance in order to have a less than substantial living allowance from the government so that I could be home with my children. And this put me in a very, very conflicted place, because while I absolutely wanted to be with my children and for them to have some kind of very personal village contact, which I didn't get that they would have if they went to a daycare, and then as soon as their daycare age was reached, that these people wouldn't be part of their life anymore.
Mm.
And that these people, because of their codes of conduct in their professions, would be walking a very thin line if they came to my children's birthday parties or had a personal relationship of any kind with me or them outside of the daycare context or the school context or the coaching or the lessons. And I even was doing this in a part of the world that was very out of the way, a very kind of small, tight knit community, so to speak. That a lot of people living there live there because of this richness of what they call community. And the disparity that I see in humans everywhere who acknowledge this lack of community, but also seem to have a vision for community that falls far short of what I think is possible for humans and what would be rich for humans.
Nicole,
Yes.
you have just said something that made me understand a feeling that I've always had, and I haven't been able to understand why it was there in this way. Because until I was 9 years old, I grew up with the same people around me in a kind of isolated place in Africa. And there was always the same adults. And there was my parents and my brother and my sister, and my mother homeschooled me. And when she couldn't take it anymore because she had other things, I was homeschooled by a teacher for 2 years who lived with us. And from age 9, I was shipped to Europe, and I started meeting people that had always been shipped from daycare to school to activity to the kind of life that you're now describing. And I've always felt this big disconnect that I now suddenly understand more, because I do not know what that's like. And I've always felt like there was this village feeling just missing in people that I met after that. And I've always felt this big cold feeling in my chest. And I've failed to see that it was that I've had this experience that I did not share with anybody. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you, Naomi. I would like to welcome into our space my daughter Genevieve.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
Genevieve, I feel so glad that you're here. And I admit I feel a little bit scared also. And I'm going to give a little bit more context for everyone listening about my motherhood story. I've already shared about how I became a mother very young and chose to give birth at home. I've spoken about the viciousness that I encountered in my immediate family included, and from the world around me, who were ignorant about the scientifically evidenced safety of home birth. I've spoken a bit about making the choice to allow my children to go to school like they wanted to, even though I wanted to learn with them, to continue to learn and grow with them and watch as they discovered the world and to continue discovering the world myself. I've talked a bit about how I accepted being in a very low income bracket in order to stay at home with my children. And I've talked a bit about how much this lack of adult initiation factors into how I'm seeing my mother story in retrospect. There were so many times when I was in this space that put me in a position of potential argument and conflict with, like I said, healthcare providers, my family, who of course wanted the best for me in terms of safety and in terms of being able to thrive. There were times when I was put in conflict or found myself in conflict with my children's fathers. And it's clear to me from here that the source of this conflict are the memes of modern culture that say that there's a right way and a wrong way. And there were many times when people who saw me choosing a different way insinuated that that meant that I thought their ways were wrong or bad. And this was never the case. And there were so many times when I didn't have the capacity or the ability to engage in this conversation where someone had assumed that I was judging them or their ways, and they engaged with me as if I was, and then my instinct or my pattern, my conditioning was to defend myself or explain myself. And then the argument unfolded because there were two sides to it. And I didn't know how to hold space for what was essentially an unfair conversation, a conversation full of holes and full of unconscious assumptions and expectations and feelings and emotions and beliefs. And again, this relates back to the very act, the choice, the decision to engage in mother graduation itself. So what a mother graduation is for me is simply an opportunity to catch up on all of these authentic adult initiation processes that I didn't get when I turned 18 or so, and that I continued not to get as the years and decades went by. I also grappled because there was a very conscious awareness in me that I wanted my children to go through the milestones of growing up in ways that had more in them than the ways that I had encountered. And some examples of this bring me to this piece that seems to be about how it is that by nature of the female body, the life of a female, of a woman, has built into it certain initiations that are simply biological. The onset of menarche and menstruation the act of giving birth as a physical ordeal that puts you up against life and death. Those are the two main examples that stand out to me as almost gifts of grace from nature, from Gaia herself, that help grow a woman up in these ways. And it was glaringly obvious to me, having two sons, how costly it was and has been and would be for young men to not go through some kind of initiation. And one of the lenses, or one of the bright principles that is shining into my life, along with so many other principles such as initiation and love and community, family, village, is the bright principle of radical responsibility. And when I consider how modern culture is essentially a culture without initiation, which therefore produces the result of a species, a human presence on the earth where radical responsibility is barely happening, where child level responsibility and maybe adolescent responsibility are the prevalent forms of responsibility being taken, in that child level responsibility means that the children, no matter how old they are leaving messes for someone else to clean up. In adult level responsibility, even, the way that goes is that it's, I'll be responsible, I'll clean up messes if I get paid, if I get something for it. Mothers are legendary when it comes to being responsible victims. And this is something that I have struggled for 30 years to find my way out of. I do not want to be a victim, not of modern culture, not of my circumstances, not of my wounds, not of my losses. And another thing that I encountered over and over again was this accusation that I was being a victim. And that in being a victim, I turned into a perpetrator, perpetrating victimhood on others. And one of the things that comes with this evolving and emerging into some new form of myself is to learn and practice and experiment with and find out what it is to have radical responsibility happening. And this was one of the other huge resonant kind of chords that was struck in me when I encountered possibility management. And what I've learned is that possibility management as a set of distinctions and maps and tools and processes has its origins in its point of origin in radical responsibility. And that this is how it is that the tools and maps and distinctions make possible a culture, a new culture that is not patriarchy and that is not matriarchy either. And the term that's been coined in possibility management to describe this next culture is archiarchy. And that is a culture in which archetypal men and archetypal women, similar, I hear, to what you described, Zoe, as divine man, divine woman. Some people talk about sovereign humans, and I would say authentic adult humans who have come into adulthood and then have gone beyond adulthood, even beyond this adult level responsibility of I'll clean up the mess if I get something for it, and into radical responsibility where collaboration and choice are happening, where each individual has their own authority and is negotiating intimacy, negotiating collaboration with others. And from that way of being human, I finally kind of connected the dots between everything that I grieved as missing from the village in which I raised my children, which could be described as a village. Indeed, I could, in an optimistic kind of way, see that I was raising my children in a village. But wherever the disconnects were, my in-person, day-to-day staying homeness and being in it really helped me to notice the contrast about what was missing and by how much, that I started to be able to see this new possibility of village, especially when I looked back historically into how Indigenous people all over the earth had once lived. When I looked at those examples, I also sensed that something was missing. And it's been a long time. It's taken a long time for me to really be able to kind of discern what that is. And how I would describe it so far is that it looks to me that in Indigenous village where initiation was happening, what people of those villages were being initiated into was the culture of the village. And that gave them a role and a purpose and a place and an identity that was kind of on the menu of that village. And by all accounts, it sounds like these Indigenous humans did a magnificent job of having a place for everyone. And what breaks my heart about it is that when a culture of numb conquerors came, very few, if any, and I really only think that I've heard of one, had what it took to stand up and not let the invaders take over. And again, I feel so scared to say this because it could be perceived as if I am saying that something's something was wrong or bad or about how Indigenous culture and village was happening. And that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is there's somewhere that all of us can evolve to. It's beyond the kind of this kind of reliance, this interreliance that is incumbent on having a village. And how I put it together in my own mind has to do with how becoming a refugee of modern culture has necessitated my resourcefulness and my resilience. And it set me on this very narrow path that I think if I continue can take me through the eye of the needle into next culture completely. I would like to think that I'm already there, but I notice inside of me the evidence that modern patriarchal capitalist empire is still in me as a set of survival patterns and mechanisms, despite what I want. Because this isn't about what we consciously want. It's about going into the unconscious and making it conscious so that real choices are being made. Because so much of what I still do is reactive. And there's no choice when reaction is happening, no conscious choice. And this is where my heart sings with joy to notice, and for over a year now to have been experimenting and testing the distinctions and tools and maps and possibility managers who are part of this village, this community, that are using these tools to create something different inside ourselves and between ourselves, and then take that into the world more and more. And so part of what I want as I go through this mother graduation is to test myself against the influences of modern culture and put myself, so to speak, into the village square and risk being hunted as a witch in order to really gain the skills and the capacity and the softer ability to face the perpetrators of modern culture, the pillars of modern culture in other people, and be with them. And I know that I can't do that alone. I know that I need experiment partners, people who will give me feedback, that it will be gold for me so that I can notice where I didn't get it, notice the beep, as we say in possibility management, get the information from the beep and shift and keep going. And I consider myself so lucky and blessed to have found a community full of people who are, first and foremost, braving becoming unnumb and feeling all of these excruciatingly painful emotions that have been packed away in our bodies, in our emotional bodies, our energetic bodies, maybe even in our DNA, from all of our ancestors who watched family members and loved ones be burnt at the stake, be hung, be lynched, be exiled, be enslaved, be killed in the name of war, in the name of fighting for this resources and dehumanizing each other. I've been searching all my life for what makes something completely different possible. And I found it. And it is not easy.
It's more painful to live with the consequences of not feeling than it is to feel.
I too have
Way
reached.
more, way more.
I too have reached that point where the consequences of not living full out became more painful than the pain of opening and feeling and grieving and facing loss.
What is it like to be in a platform of people like in these experimentational processes? It seems to me that the resonance is very similar. In other words, it seems to me that I might be able to challenge you, but I'm also here because I believe in next culture. So how this maybe doesn't sound like another graduation question, but I guess like, how do you feel change can be made when you're resonating with similar vibration in this like little cooker? How does that then, I mean, other than our own radical self-responsibility, obviously that's it. But I just mean, what difference, what impact are we really making when we sit in this small container and discuss these things that can resonate in a really pure, beautiful way for all of us? But how does that expand into, how does that permeate into real change?
Thank you. That is a great question.
Yes.
I'd like to speak to that.
Yeah,
Go.
me too.
I love your question, and I sense that we are in the middle of that, of starting to really slowly, step by step, build that. And I have a analogy that I don't really like because it's a technological one, and I love more like poetic stuff. But there's this thing where when new phone or dazzling technological equipment specimen comes to the world as an invention, it's only for the few people who can pay for it. And then sometimes people are angry at people that have money. But what happens is that first some people can pay for it, and then as time goes by, it becomes less special to have one because they're being produced a little bit more. because people actually bought them, and then they start becoming mainstream, and then they start actually really becoming mainstream, and then you can get one second hand for nothing, you know. It's kind of a progression that happens. And right now I feel like it's the same with this kernel of people that are doing initiations consciously with themselves, and it's spreading slowly. I'm in Costa Rica right now because the first Next Culture Lab was held here. There's going to be one in Mexico soon, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with a lady that works here, and we were having conversations about what we were doing, and she's interested to join something online when there's something in Spanish. And I think this is patience work, and it's not about getting the rewards of it in this lifetime on a global scale. And I do not mind about that. And I do think that stepping, like, foundational stones can be laid, and that's my my hope and my fire, that it can trickle down slowly, because as of now, there are many things that people wouldn't have the resources to join, and things have been democratized incredibly because of everything being online now. So that's how I hope to create change, because just through hearing that there is other options, just through hearing something that might spark someone's interest, and that being, you know, reaching some people that are actors in different kind of communities, and just that spreading like seeds being carried by birds, I think feels as like an organic way, and that's the best I can come up with, and I really feel like it's valuable enough to make me glad about it.
Thank you, Naomi.
Yeah, I think that we're conditioned, or like we're trained as people that grew up in a patriarchy. We're trained to expect results. We're trained for efficiency and product, and this shift is one that has been exponential in my lifetime.
Yes.
And is continuing to be more and more exponential. And like Naomi is saying, I think is patience work. And it's also about becoming a bridge. It's being on, it's not about being on in next culture and being like, hey, we're here, like we got it all figured out already. We're in this beautiful space. It's about having one foot in this amazing, beautiful space where bright principles are happening, and one foot in the patriarchy saying, hey, like, here's the door, come, go, go, go. And like, it's about becoming that bridge, and being careful about those thoughts of like, oh, well, it's not like I'm not good enough, or it's not gonna happen in my lifetime, so it's the work I'm doing is not worth it. And it's about not getting discouraged by the slowness of it, and just taking baby steps. And it's excruciating. I would love to be in next culture already and just be there and have a party and a great time and be radically responsible with all the other radically responsible people and just live happily ever after in paradise. And that's not how it is. That's a fantasy world. What I'm interested in is sharing the treasure and finding out ways that I can give this treasure away. It's like I found this treasure, this next culture treasure, and I'm like, how can I make it so appealing to you that you want to take it? And some people are like, I don't want your treasure. And it's about the way, because sometimes I'm scared of my own treasure. And I'm like, oh my God, this changed my life. Like, I don't know if you want to take this. And it's about changing the way and learning the way that I present my treasure so that people can take it from me.
Thank you, Brianne.
Yeah.
And I'm always, not always, I'm often feeling into this thing of when am I passionate and when am I just being insistent and arrogant if I think that everybody should want my treasure? Where do I have intuition that this is important, and when is that just being ignorant to whatever else I cannot see? And then I just come back to center and I keep going.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
resonate with what you're saying in the sense that, like, if I have the attitude that it's not my treasure, like I found this and it's not mine and I'm just trying to give it away, then it's like, it's different than like, this is my thing and I want you to have it. Yeah.
Yeah, Brienne, the treasure that you're describing is more like a flashlight that you're offering somebody who's in the darkness so that they can see what's really there, what's really happening, and what's really possible.
Yeah.
I've come more and more in touch, especially in the last 5 weeks, through being part of mage spaceholder training, with a more kind of subtle, energetic level of it, which I'm familiar with from my exposure and experience as a girl brought up in the Christian church and who studied Raja Kriya Yoga for over a decade, and who has, these stories in my world about people whose very presence changed things. And there's always been this anger in me about that kind of more spiritual focused approach, because it didn't seem like practical, everyday relevant. Also because there was so much fantasy and kind of skipping over and ignoring and shaming when it came to emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm re-encountering it as I am as part of possibility management, not as a bypass of all of the emotional, physical, intellectual bodies, but more as a kind of addition to that. There's this part about, like that word you used, resonance. There's this part about how Gaia has and is a morphogenetic field, and that I'm noticing how different I am. I'm becoming different as these maybe as these old wounds and their energy scrambled lumps kind of get combed and cleared out of me, maybe as maybe as my heart space opens and my chakras and vortices align, and maybe that's what's happening finally. But there's something about how consciousness changes the morphogenetic field, and that there's this kind of physicist kind of in me that is also a bit of a woo-woo level physicist that says when consciousness reaches a certain tipping point, it does what Naomi described. It becomes what we're doing, what we have. And that as maybe, yes, an early adapter, that the cool thing to me about it is that nobody can do this for me. I have to do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And also nobody can stop me from doing it. So I can do 100% of my part. And then if that means that by whatever mechanism it happens, whether it's because I become a more adept space holder or a more profound energetic presence as I walk down any old road, or if I become more attuned with the Earth's Coincidence Control Office and end up meeting the people who are ripe instead of being off in the weeds, meeting the other people off in the weeds. I don't know how it goes. And I am having so much fun. Like, not the kind of fun where, you have a hangover and then have to clean up all the mess after, but the kind of fun that's like high level fun. And the cost of it is yeah, like you said, Naomi, the cost of it is I'm willing to pay. About Up until about a year ago, I was mostly coming to terms with how I had previously had this commitment to help save the world, which was a huge here and now to be in. And
Mm-hmm.
I had started coming to terms with the fact that the world might not be savable, actually. It might be too late. And what I was left with was just wanting to be here with her and with others who were being here with her until my life ended. And trusting that that would be have to be enough. And who knows, maybe by some fluke we'd manage to steer the Titanic away from the iceberg. And that took a lot of emotional healing processes to get that kind of reactive desperation, I have to save the world, especially as a mother, out of my system.
What does a mother graduation initiation, what is that? What is that, Nicole?
So in addition to it being a series of initiation processes through which I change my shape out of the identity of the mother who's responsible for these children into the mother who has done her mothering and is now stepping into her next job. It is a kind of, there will be a ceremony, there will be a graduation ceremony the first of which I'm doing on May 22nd. And I say the first of my graduation ceremonies because I will do another one after Cerys is of age. I'm kind of catching up on the first three right now. And in this ceremony, which I'm creating myself, informed and inspired by the ceremonies I've heard described by other edge workers who've done this too, I will be creating and presenting to myself a certificate of graduation that honors my 3 grown-up children as having come of age. It will include storytelling. I'll share pictures, I imagine. And then what I'm also wanting to do is what's known in possibility management as a lifting, which is an in-person experience of being held up by about 8 sets of hands and physically letting go into, like, letting my identity as Sagan, Tallis, and Genevieve's mother, who's responsible for them, drop away from me. And find out what's left, because what's real won't be drop awayable. And this is where I feel joy already to find out what I can be in relation to Sagan, Tallis, and Genevieve when I have dropped, when I have let go of this, of the responsible victim piece that says you haven't done a good enough job as a mother, don't give up, keep trying to keep treating them as children. And I've noticed that that doesn't work for me or for any of them. And I'm guessing, that if anyone here has a mother who still kind of tries to be your mother and make you into a child, you may have noticed, you may have found that that doesn't work so well either for you. And, I'm really not here to talk about other people's experiences. I'm really looking forward to having that experience as an intentional, embodied, experiment-based results kind of thing.
I have just been through a process in this lab in which I thanked my parents and put them behind me as ancestors. And in which it felt so sane to be able to recognize. I mean, I knew that theoretically, but experientially, recognize my parents as 2 beings that are more than just my parents. And it felt so sane to have this whole mush between me and them just vanish. And I sense it's the same to do a mother graduation, to acknowledge that your children are adults now, and setting each other free from expectations that sometimes you're even just letting other people impose on you, and it's all just so blurry. And beautiful for a person who was fulfilling the work of being a mother to now turn towards a space in which you can have life move through you and create new things. And I hope that people can hear this as a loving thing, just as in a romantic, like in a love relationship, it's important to create connection and to experience separation or cultivate your own space, your own garden, so that you actually have something to bring into the relationship. Yeah, it's about thinking that we are all a person, we all have something to cultivate. That's okay that we decide to focus to ourselves to that, and like encumberedly.
Thank you. On a bit more of a light and playful note, I also made a pirate agreement that I would have done my mother graduation by May 22nd, or I would be giving $2,000 to the Possibility Management Canada Growness Fund. So I staked hard cash on it. And it's become easier and easier to not be scared about how that's going to go.
So this, as of yet, doesn't exist in the possibility management world that you are in. And so what I'm hearing is that you are creating this lab possibility for other mothers too. Is that true? I'm still so unclear.
It exists in that other mothers using possibility management have created for themselves mother graduations. And so much so that there was created a mother graduation website as part of the possibility management Start Over XYZ game, which is a massive multiplayer on and offline personal transformation evolution game. It's been kind of that kind of translates possibility management into something that anybody can do for free too. And so I have been using the website as a resource, and I've also been in touch with mostly 2 women who have done mother graduations already. And in talking to them about what they did and how they did it, I've been very much inspired, and I got a lot of clarity about what I wanted for my mother graduation. And then ECHO, the Earth Coincidence Control Office, has played a really neat part in that today, April 14th, is the most likely calendar date of my having become a mother. My son Sagan was born on January 14th, and this may have been my conception date. May the 5th is the day after Tallis's 26th birthday. and May 22nd will be the day after Genevieve's 19th birthday. So all three of my grown-up children are being marked, so to speak, in this series of 3 gatherings. And then Cerys's birthday happens in July, and in 5 more years I'll be that much more informed and empowered to do my final graduation ceremony. And I hope that during those 5 years I'll be able to share and support other women moving toward and maybe into their own graduation ceremonies. A big part of the work that I did while I was a kind of in-person full-time mother, and since I have not been, which has been the last 10 years, has been a type of inventory about the fact that there's a section in the Mother Graduation website that's about preparing your children for your graduation, for your emancipation is a term that's used. And the first thing it says is, it's too late to do that. That the time to prepare them was, and so my hope is that I can also bring something to mothers whose children are all ages that is more about the possibilities that I discovered through being a mother on the edge of modern culture, and now having this clarity about what might be possible in regard to next culture, so as to empower the kind of relating that a mother can have with her children and partners and village, with herself, that makes it so that her mother graduation is maybe doesn't have the stickiness that mine does, and this kind of the heaviness and the kind of regret that I have, that that I have this story that my children and I have so much unfinished, have so much undone and unseen to and untended, and yet it's still time for me to graduate and let them go, let them grow up, let them grow up, let them be without a mother hen, so to speak.
So why, it seems to me that you're okay with difficult questions. And I have this feeling inside of me that my next question might feel really crunchy. And I don't want to make any assumptions, but I feel it within myself. Why the financial part of this? Why am I paying to participate in your mother graduation? And why would you pay to come to my mother graduation? And I love you also.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. Why did you pay?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because mothers need financial support 100%, because we are wrapped up in this patriarchy and it's absolutely fucking ridiculous. So I'm so happy to support you. And to support any energy, any financial energy that goes towards mothers in general.
Yeah, thank you. I first created this event and didn't have a cost to it. And I got in trouble for that. I have people close to me who I've asked to catch me giving away for free what is valuable. And the mother graduation ceremony won't be a paid event. The ceremony itself is, and there's an invitation, there will be an invitation to bring gifts. Just like a wedding or a birthday. And it's interesting that we don't think of ourselves as paying to go to a birthday party or a wedding or a bridal shower or a baby shower. And this is another part that comes in around next culture is how it has a lot to do with our relationship to money, value, cost, interest, not as compound interest over time, but as in attention. Another way that I've been encouraged to think about it is that my 30 years as a mother gave me an education that, had it been an academic experience, I would have at least a triple doctorate by now. And that then asking for people to pay to hear me speak or read my stuff or come to my offerings is just how it would go. And strangely, I have gone and received the work of people who have academic educations of that degree and wouldn't have wanted to pay them. I didn't get my money's worth. So this is a great question and a very slippery area, very crunchy and slippery at the same time. I think for all of us, for most of us who have still got so much survival conditioning and money-centered thoughtware and behaviors happening. So much so that sometimes I think it's hard for us to even see it because it's so normal. So, I mean, it's not normal and it's what's happening. There are 10 more minutes left in the time that I allocated. And I would encourage anyone to ask any questions that call out more value, that would be empowering or valuable for you.
Yeah, so I can speak to that because something that comes up for me is I enjoy process. Process makes sense to me. Process feels very tangible. So for me, sorry, my computer's making noises. For me personally, to feel the value exchange, I appreciate having process and knowing the process. I'm also, you know me, Nicole, I'm also very chill and I'm very happy to surrender into process. But for me, I feel it makes more sense to me, like kind of what you said, if this is something that I'm showing up to where I want to receive value, then having a process that's tangible for me, no, yeah, kind of like knowing what I'm doing, knowing what I'm getting into, having this idea, and then being able to go through that process with tangible steps feels really good to me. And it feels like something that then is easily translated for me into value. This is what I'm showing up for. These are the steps that I'm going to take. And, again, I'm going to repeat, I'm also very okay to surrender and to be in whatever this is. Yeah.
So do you have something to ask for about that?
Clarity around your agenda and your process of it's so funny. It's such a juxtaposition, right? It's like this tug of love of like, oh, the archetypes of the matriarch and the patriarch, because there's a real sense of flow in this, like this cultivating the womb space and surrendering into like not knowing what this birthing experience is going to be. It's so synonymous with the actual birth, isn't it? Right? Like you're inseminated, there's this idea, there's this womb space, and the whole rest of it is surrender. You don't know when you're going to puke. You don't know when you don't know. And it's really nice to be able to read a book and have an idea of like, oh, based on all of this generational knowledge, we know that these are some possibilities. Yeah, I just still feel so and I'm not trying to mucky any waters, and I'm scared that I'm over here being like, I'm mucking waters. I have that fear, that self-talk. But my ask is like, what is the agenda? What is the process? What is the outcome?
And do you mean what's a process that you could go through?
No, what's yours? What am I showing up for? What I still feel so unclear about. Like, I know you've mentioned some things about what you want, but it's like for me to feel compelled and called to continue, then I want to know how to show up for you, because this is about you now. And now I understand that this graduation is not about anybody else. This is about your graduation. That's my understanding.
I feel sad about that because that's not how it is for me. Yes, this is my mother graduation. I am in process of an initiation called mother graduation. And I have been in it for my own sake, for my children's sake, and for the sake of mothers and children and men and Gaia. There's nothing that it doesn't include. And like I said at the beginning, it has been happening in small spaces with few people. And it's been happening a lot. I had a process with Brianne today and another possibility manager a couple of days ago. I was in training spaces and team spaces multiple times every week for the last year. And so the process I'm in is a series of processes. Some of them last a couple hours. Some of them last a week. Some of them last, I'm in one that is 3 months more like. And what I want is to share about it. Share about it and take questions about it. And also, if people are interested in participating in a more direct way, we can do that. And that's how it's emergent as well as inevitable. Like you described birth, there's this emergent process and you don't know when you're going to puke, and you're going to have a baby. You don't know if that baby will live, and you're going to have a baby. I mean, then you get into some crazy territory. Came to mind. I have a friend whose dog was bred to have puppies, and she had what's known as a phantom pregnancy, where no puppies were born and she had labor. That's kind of way out in left field in a way, and I pointed to the right when I said that. But my point is that if you want to participate, if you want to co-create, let me know. I'm not creating an agenda until I'm creating an agenda. And then there will be one. So far, it's this event this night and the next one on May 5th. And something may emerge that's other than that. I have been in touch since last July with many different people saying, I'm doing this. Do you want to be a part of it, or does it interest you? And it's kind of one of those long, slow conversations. And then certain people have jumped on my team, so to speak, and we've decided, we've set some calendar dates and things like that. So in a way, the answer is you get to decide. And I'm very, very looking forward to having people start to approach me more often and say, this mother graduation thing you're doing, how can I be part of it? Or how can I create one for myself? So thank you, Zoe. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for coming, and thank you, all of you, for being here and listening, and for not having the part happen that was more experiential and experimental in this particular call. And it's 9 o'clock, and I declare this space complete. And if there's any individual incompleteness, then I will stay here for a little bit longer.
Thank you.